What's up, y'all? It is Pigeon Pirate, and I am back again today with another MSI Preview video where we are going to be talking about Paris Saint-Germain esports from PCS, or as everyone knows them, PSG Talon. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. So their top laner is Hanabi, jungler is River, mid laner is Maple, their bottom laner is Unified, but will be replaced by Doggo here at MSI, and their support is Kaiwing, and they are coached by Coach Helper. So, first and foremost, we have to address the big elephant in the room, which is Doggo replacing Unified as their AD carry. Now, the reason for this is because unfortunately, Unified has come down with pneumoned thorax, is I believe what it's called, and it's a condition essentially where one's lungs collapse when the air leaks into the space between the lung and the chest wall, and so that air outside of the lung actually collapses the lung inside of it. Now, even though this sounds really scary, it's actually a pretty easy and fast recovery for it. A lot of times, it doesn't even require any type of medical surgery or assistance to it. But regardless, it is something that is fixable and something that shouldn't impair Unified for a long period of time, and there are preventative measures for him to take in order for it to not happen more in the future. So, regardless, we wish him a very fast and speedy recovery. But with that being said, Doggo is going to be replacing him at MSI. And Doggo, of course, is the AD carry from Beyond Gaming, who was the runner-up in this year's PS or PCS playoffs. But I'll talk more about how that should impact the team moving forward once I get into the analysis of this section. But I do wanted to make clear as to why he is being replaced and the fact that Unified should be able to make a full recovery and one pretty soon. So we're all keeping him in our thoughts and hoping he makes that quick and speedy recovery. But with that being addressed, let's jump into how PSG Talon were able to qualify for Worlds this year. And so, or not Worlds, MSI, but the reason I probably said Worlds is because they are the returning Worlds representative from 2020 in the region, and they actually had a really good showing then. They went 6 and 5 at Worlds, and once they actually made it into the group stage, they were able to beat both Rogue from the EU as well as JD Gaming from China in those play-in stages, or not in the play-in stages, in the group stages. So they had a tremendously good showing for being an emerging region, and they're really looking to build off of that at this year's MSI. And they've got the potential to do it because they had an incredibly dominant split this year. They went 17 and 1, and their only loss that they had during the entire season, including both regular season and playoffs, was the second game that they played. And it was in the very first week that they started playing. So they ended up winning 25 games in a row to close out the season, which is just insane. As a basketball reference, since I love basketball, this is the same as the 2016 and 2017 Warriors level of dominance, where they just wiped the floor essentially with every single team that they played. So, their only loss in week one that did come to Beyond Gaming, who they did ultimately beat in the finals as well. But throughout that regular season, they were able to win. Their support player was able to win the Players of the Week, Kai Wing, in both week one and week two. And their AD Carry Unified won Player of the Week in week four. And both River, their jungler, and Unified, their AD Carry, they tied for the second most game MVPs throughout the season, each of them getting five. So they had a very dominant split and one in which a lot of players contributed heavily to it. So once they actually reached the playoffs, they continued their dominance. And the way the playoffs work in the PCS is it's an 8-team double round robin, or not 8-team double round robin, it's an 8-team double elimination bracket where the top two teams automatically get a bye into the semifinals, and the bottom two teams have to automatically start in the losers bracket. So, being the number one seed, PSG Talon, they were able to get a bye the first round. Then they played J Team in the semis where they swept them 3-0. Then played Beyond Gaming in the winners finals where they swept them 3-0 and faced Beyond Gaming again in the grand finals where once again they swept them 3-0. And they did this off the back of essentially all of their players. Maple won the Week 1 MVP of the playoffs, and Unified won the Week 3 MVP of the playoffs. So, like I said, they really dominated heavily ever since the beginning of the split, and they are going into MSI being a really big favorite in the region to make a splash and represent their region well. A good comparison to the NA is they are similar. They've got similar hopes for the PSG Talon that North America had when CLG went back in 2015 and made that miracle run. So they're hoping to do something similar, but why essentially are they this good? Why are they this dominant? And the first thing that I want to talk about this in this section is talking about how the replacement of Doggo is actually going to impact the team. Because I think that's the biggest question that people have going into this MSI around this team. And don't get me wrong, losing Unified was a big loss for them. He was a great AD carry, but I don't think this is going to be a monumental loss that fundamentally changes them as a team. And here's why. Unified was great, and he played really good scaling champions like Kai'Sa, Tristana, and Xayah. And he was able to do that with both a dominant laning phase, but a very dominant late game as well. He had an insane KDA, and this is going to be across every single player for PSG Talon because they're so good. But his KDA was the best out of all of them at a 14.6, which is insane. He had the best first blood rate at a 42% among AD carries in the league. He had the best experience difference at 10 for AD carries, second best in damage per minute for AD carries, and really carried late game fights for them super well. However, Doggo, he was just as good in a lot of these splits, if not better. He also likes to play scaling champs. His most played champions are Kai'Sa, Tristana, but instead of the Xayah, he played a lot of Jinx and Samira. Instead of being the best KDA, he had the second best. He had the second best first blood rate for 80 carries. He was the second best experience difference at 10, but had the best CS numbers per minute. He's got the best damage per minute, so he's actually doing more damage later on than Unified is. And he had the highest damage percentage for his team as well. So he was really carrying Beyond Gaming in a lot of their late game fights. And he's also the best warding AD carry in the entire league. So he's not just carrying them through damage, he's also really helping with their late game vision and helping them control the map as well. So this makes me feel really confident that he's going to be able to fill that same role that Unified is now leaving with his absence. Because I think Doggo not just is capable of carrying late game fights to the same degree that Unified is, but I actually think his early game stats are better than Unified. And this shows in the grand finals. Every single game in that grand finals, despite losing 3-0 to PSG Talon, Doggo was able to get a 2v2 kill in the bottom lane without any type of jungle interference at all. So he is playing the lanes to win and is capable of winning them on their own. So if you mix his lane dominance that he has with his ability to scale as well and walking into the team culture that PSG already has, I think he's going to be able to succeed really well. And a comparison that I like to make is one to my favorite NBA team, the Denver Nuggets. And you've probably noticed me wearing Nuggets stuff basically in every single one of the videos. But PSG Talent, similarly to the Denver Nuggets, have built a really good system and culture around their team in which they're able to lift each other up and play at a really strong way, regardless of the players that are actually fitting into it. So, in the NBA, when Jamal Murray, the Denver Nuggets' second best player, got hurt, a lot of people thought it was going to be the end of our season. But the Nuggets still were able to rally around and are still churning out wins at an even higher percentage because everyone's able to step in and fill that role because the culture and the team play around the team is so strong that regardless of who gets put into it, they can fill that spot tremendously well and contribute in ways that are going to benefit the team as a whole. And I think PSG Talon has that same exact thing despite losing their AD carry. I think even though he is a really big part of why they're winning, I think they have a culture and a system on a way they like to play League of Legends that even if you sub out Unified for Doggo, who's a comparable AD carry anyways, he's going to be able to fill that same spot and do it in a really successful way. So I actually think this is not going to be a really awful thing that's going to hinder their performance. Now, the question still remains is whether or not it's going to impact the late game communication a ton for the team. But I do think that's something that is not going to be the end of the world for them either. So, outside of Doggo's entrance to it, why else were these guys really good? And the answer is essentially they had the best player in every single role, aside from probably top lane. So, starting with their jungler, River, this guy had the best KDA for junglers at 12.9, incredibly good KDA. He had the best gold difference at 10 for junglers, the best experience difference at 10 for junglers, and the best CS numbers and the most damage out of any jungler in the entire league. So this is a guy who's really good at being able to get individual leads for himself and then using that to spread it around the map and be show up really big in the later team fights that PSG is ultimately able to win to snowball them into these later game victories and ending the games really fast. So he's not the greatest early ganker in the entire league, and he has somewhat of a limited champion pool. He really did not want to play a lot of Hecarim and played very little Hecarim throughout the entire split. And Hecarim was a power pick in every single region, so that does make me a little bit nervous, but nonetheless, he's able at getting really big advantages for himself in the jungle and being able to use those advantages to snowball other lanes and then show up really big when the team needs it when fighting around big objectives. Maple, their mid laner, he is a tremendously good carry for these guys and one who works with Unified at really carrying all the damage later on in the games and getting them the big kills. So he plays a lot of Sylas and a lot of those scaling champions like Silas Azir. He played a ton of Azir and a lot of scaling champions like Azir throughout the split, but he does have a very good Silas and a very good Akali that basically every team needs to ban out throughout the PSG because they're so scared of him as well. And this guy has the best KDA among mid laners at 12.7. He's second best in gold difference for mid laners at 10 minutes. Third best at experience difference at 10 minutes. He's only fifth in damage per minute as a mid laner, but that's also because all the mid laners are pumping out a ridiculous amount of damage. So he's actually sixth overall, even though he's only fifth for the mid laners, and his damage per minutes are actually really, really high. So he's still pumping out a ton of damage, even if it's not the best as all the other mid laners in the PSG or in the PCS. Um, and despite maybe not having the greatest stats in the entire world around his laning phase and his damage per minute, his eye test, he's passing with flying colors. If you watch the finals, you will see these team fights breaking down in really strange ways. And he is always pumping out insane amount of damage, getting away alive, or at least taking 2 to 3 people with him if he's going to die. And not just this, but in lane, it seems like he's always winning lane, has a big CS advantage, and not just doing that by staying in lane, but he's also far more proactive in the way he moves around the map and makes plays for others. So this is a guy who can carry hard late game, and I feel like is a big catalyst for the reason why PSG Talon is able to win a lot of their games and win them so strong. And finally, their support, Kaiwing. This guy is awesome. He plays really engage heavy champions like Leona, Rel, Rakan, and Thresh. But he's got insane stats. He's got the best KDA for supports, obviously, at 9.3. He's got the highest first blood percentage, the best gold and experience difference at 10. And this guy knows how to team fight. Usually between him and River, these two guys are engaging on a lot of these objective driven team fights, and it's their setups that are able to carry these team fights for their team. Especially with Kaiwing, he is always showing up huge in them, being able to both engage and then turn back and peel for his carry so well. It's really impressive to see the way that he's able to set up his team for really strong success in these team fights. And so, with all that being said, how do they actually play as a team? Well, they're really good at getting a lead and then ending the game in a really clean manner. So they've got the fastest game time by on average. They've got the best KDA by far. It's not even close. Their average KDA as a team is a 3.48, and the next closest is only a 1.66. So they're just absolutely dominating in the kills department. They've got the best early game rating in the entire league, and they've got the third best mid to late rating. So even though it might seem like, okay, they don't have the best mid to late game rating ever, which granted, other teams are probably a little bit better at closing out, that stat does heavily favorite those teams that start with less of a lead and then are able to win the game. So since PSG Talon have big leads going into the mid and late game anyway, that stat's not going to heavily favorite them unless they're continuing to even snowball it to even larger proportions. And with all this, they also have the second best lane control and the best jungle control in the entire league. So these guys know how to get an early lead and then close it out really cleanly. For emerging regions, typically what you see is they are either playing like crazy, just taking every single team fight that they possibly can and turning the games into somewhat a clown fiesta, or they're emulating the major regions like the LCK at just not of a high level. So even though they're playing really clean and slower games, they're doing it at not the same level as some of these more dominant regions. PSG Talent, on the other hand, they play like major regions. They play a more controlled style that still has a lot of aggressiveness baked into it, but they are doing it in a way, in a fashion, in such a dominant way in their region that it makes me genuinely feel like they are going to be able to contend at the highest level with some of these other major teams in the more dominant regions. So, with all that being said, what then are my predictions for them going into MSI? Well, I think they have three big questions that they need to answer. One, will Doggo impact the late game, and how will that change their shot calling? Like I said, I do think this could potentially impact it minimally, but nothing too major. But who knows? At MSI and on the world stage, maybe even just a small breakdown in communication come late game could be the difference between winning and losing versus some of the best competition in the world. The other one is, can this team play from behind? Since they are winning basically every single game throughout the entirety of the game in the split, some people are wondering whether or not they can come back from deficits, which to my response is yeah, they can. They're just a great team, and great teams know how to win. But two, if you're asking that questions, then you didn't watch the finals because they were down in basically every single game in the grand finals to be on gaming, yet they still came back and won those games in an incredibly clean fashion that really never made you doubt the fact that they were going to win, even though they were behind in each one of those games. And then the last question is, will some team be able to punish Hanabi at a really high rate? And to me, this is the most legitimate question because even though Hanabi is not a bad top laner, he's really average for the region. Average on the world stage can be exploited and exploited at a really high level. So that is something that I am interested in watching and seeing how it plays out. Regardless, they're going to be in Group B, and I think they'll have some good competition against Mad Lions from the EU. And I think Pain Gaming from Brazil is really going to be looking to play upsets here. So they are going to be able to, or they are going to have some tough competition in that group. But I do think they're going to be able to make it out of that stage fairly easy, and they're probably even going to be competing against Mad Lions for the #1 seed out of that group. So regardless, it should be a lot of fun to watch. But as always, if you think I'm right, think I'm wrong, think I'm an idiot, just let me know in the comments, and I look forward to reading them and doing some more of these videos. So thanks again for watching.